And a hearty welcome to one and all on this rainy and somewhat snowy Sunday in New York. This is episode 49 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. As always, I want to thank you if you're joining me on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already. Don't forget to click like, smash the subscriber bell, flip on those notifications. Or if you're joining me for the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and the other platforms, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications if you haven't done so already, and if you enjoy the content, of course. Today, I'm going to do a little bit of a memory lane thing again, and going to talk about the kind of iconic, legendary filmmakers. We talked about who is the greatest Hollywood filmmaker of all time. But I want to kind of narrow in and talk about these sort of iconic, legendary filmmakers, which of their films I actually saw in theaters. And as I was kind of going through the memory banks here, I was a little bit shocked and appalled at some of the conclusions I realized, which I won't spoil immediately. But as with the, who do you think is the greatest filmmaker of all time? The filmmakers we're going to talk about in this particular episode are Ridley Scott, James Cameron, Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, Francis Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and Stanley Kubrick. So that will give us 8. And I hate to say it, but the person I'm going to talk about first, Martin Scorsese, I've never actually seen a Martin Scorsese picture. That's how he describes them. He never says a film by Martin Scorsese, directed by Martin Scorsese in the credits. It always says a Martin Scorsese picture. Now, I've seen his work in academic settings where it was like a movie theater, but I've never seen anything of his in theaters. I didn't see Shutter Island when it was out. The Age of Innocence I watched in a film class. I didn't see it in theaters. I didn't go to the movies when Casino was out. I wasn't into The Departed. I didn't see anything of his in theaters. And that is a significant blight on my cineast resume. I don't really have an excuse. I just never went. Now, most of the movies that I missed in theaters, Bringing Out the Dead, I think is phenomenal. I love The Aviator, Gangs of New York, great. I didn't go to the movies that much. Once we got out of the 90s, my trips to the movie theaters were kind of few and far between. So the movies that I could have seen, Cape Fear, but I didn't go to the movies much then. I had the chance to see Goodfellas in 1990, punted that too. Didn't see any Martin Scorsese films in theaters. That is horrendous, and listen, you can flame me all you want because I consider myself a Scorsese scholar, NYU grad. He taught advanced seminar the year before I got there. I love the guy. I believe Taxi Driver is the single greatest film produced by Hollywood in the last 50 years. That's the movie I'll go with. So I adore this guy, just never saw any of his films in theaters. Let the shaming commence. All right, so Ridley Scott, another filmmaker I adore. I did not see Thelma and Louise. That's the same year as Cape Fear, for reference, 1991. I really wasn't going to the movies very often when I was still high school age. I didn't see, I was going to say True Romance. It's Tony Scott. But I didn't see White Squall in theaters. I did see Gladiator. I saw Gladiator in theaters and absolutely loved it. And that's also a bit of a polarizing pick for Best Picture. But I'm a fan. And 2000 was a decent year for movies, but I had no issue. I had no issue with that winning Best Picture, Gladiator. There were other good films. A lot of people were hoping for Aaron Brockovich, but I was okay with Gladiator taking it. I'll tell you, a Ridley Scott film I also saw in theaters and really, really liked was Matchstick Men. Shockingly effective, like really good. I don't even know why or what got me motivated to go, because this was into the early 2000s. I don't know. I guess I felt like going to the movies, and I saw it, and I was shocked. You know, Nicolas Cage put out a lot of movies in that era. Like he did The Weatherman and Lord of War, which I think is a really, really solid film. Doesn't do what you think, and neither does Matchstick Men. Really terrific film, solid all around. One of Nick Cage's kind of better under the radar performances, if you ask me, and you could say the same about Lord of War. But Sir Ridley is a phenomenal filmmaker, but I'm looking at his filmography here. Again, I've seen Blade Runner in classroom settings that looked like movie theaters, but I didn't, like I saw Dirty Harry in an actual movie theater at a revival at the Cinema Arts Center. So that would count in this regard, but Don Siegel is not, he's not on the list of greatest filmmakers. But I didn't see Blade Runner at like 70 millimeter print in the city or at Cinema Arts. I just didn't. So I believe those two films are the only movies. Like I didn't see The Martian, a movie I caught on video. I didn't see anything else. I didn't see anything else of Ridley's in theaters. I haven't seen Napoleon. I'm just looking at this here. Yeah, I didn't see Napoleon. The Last Duel, great movie. Who's seen The Last Duel? And that was a film, got terrific critical reviews when it came out. I was kind of, I wasn't really that into it. The previews didn't look that interesting. And I saw it and I was dazzled. And I got to tell you, I was upset. And, the thing with Ridley, he's kind of a funny guy, because he's another one in that sort of Tarantino range where he is not afraid to piss people off and give you real opinions. Sometimes Scorsese says things like when he's talked about comic book movies, which have ruffled feathers, but it never seems like he's doing it to ruffle feathers. Scorsese is just stream of consciousness rambling along and just giving you off the cuff. Ridley Scott talked about, because he really worked hard. Not that I should even have to say that, but he put everything he had into The Last Duel, and so did the cast. Ben Affleck, surprisingly, in that kind of role, fantastic. And Adam Driver, in a different year, would have been nominated for probably supporting actor. He's that good. And nobody went to see the movie. But when I think of Ridley, the only two movies of his that I've seen in theaters are Gladiator and Matchstick Men. Because I've had long stretches of my life where I watched plenty of films, just not in theaters. So that's Ridley. Now, as far as James Cameron, I've seen two, and only two. I saw Terminator 2 3 times in theaters when I was 17. I made an exception. 3 times. I saw it in Florida with my grandpa. May he rest in peace. He took me on opening day. I believe it was July 3rd, 1991. I had been there for about a week at Fort Lauderdale, and we saw an early morning screening. It was like 9:30 or 10 a.m. I was 17. Grandpa let me get popcorn. It was such a good movie. And this was a regular theater, not even enhanced sound for that time. Still blew me away. Went back home, saw it with my dad in the theater, which is now an Equinox Gym across from what used to be called, it's now Eagle Rock. It's a development. Dad had a kind of apartment condo in there, and the Cinema 150, the old Syosset. Dad and me saw Terminator 2, blew him away too. It became one of his favorite movies. He liked the first one, but he loved the second one. And then on a random afternoon where I was off, I went back over there and I saw it for a third time. And Titanic, I saw twice in theaters. Absolutely love it. Now, if you ask me how I rank Titanic in the James Cameron pantheon, I think it's the weakest film he's ever made. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm not a fan of the Avatar movies. I know they're technically extraordinary, and he's a groundbreaking special effects guy in his own right. Digital Domain was his company, and some of the things he was able to do for Titanic. The Avatar movies I just never connected with. I saw the first one. It's good. It's good. Titanic is, I think, great, even though a lot of the dialogue doesn't really work that well. It's a little bit too much winking at the then contemporary 1997 audiences. But I love Bill Paxton, and DiCaprio and Kate and Francis Fisher is fucking amazing. and Victor Garber. It's just a terrific cast. And Gloria Stewart. Gloria Stewart, Old Rose. She had been a movie star in the early 30s. She was in one of the great horror films. Like, I learned about Gloria Stewart in film school because she was in the movie The Old Dark House, which we watched. Not in the horror film, I don't think. I think we watched it in Hollywood Myths Alternative. Same professor. The amazing David Legowski. My favorite professor at New York University, David Legowski. I think he teaches at Manhattanville now, if I'm not mistaken. But man, that guy was smart. Genius. But always been a fan of James Cameron. But those are the only two movies of his that I saw in theaters. Now, as far as Christopher Nolan, I saw Insomnia in cinemas. Didn't see Memento. Saw Insomnia. You know, that was also the kind of range of where Matchstick Men was out. Liked it, didn't love it. And I feel like it's not a lovable movie. It's not a movie that you're supposed to say, oh my God, it's so amazing. But it should have worked better than it did, because I know plenty of people that were surprised that I had a kind of lukewarm reaction. That's the only film of his that I've seen in theaters. It's ridiculous that I didn't see any of the Batman films. So I may be in a minority on this one. My favorite of his Batman trilogy is Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins is phenomenal. And I like The Dark Knight, but I feel like The Dark Knight went out of its way, for me, it went out of its way to become an uncomfortable sit. And I don't know, it's good. And Dark Knight Rises is entertaining. It's also, to me, just overly grim. Batman Begins, you get the darkness, but I don't know, the story just works better for me than the other two. And I'm sorry that I didn't see that. Again, I had the opportunity. My old buddy, Ron Saperstein, one of my favorite people to ever work out at Bev's gym, I had a chance to see that movie with him. That same year, I did see Star Wars Episode 3 with him and his wife. Well, at the time they were just dating, but his wife Dawn. That was a great movie-going experience, but I wish that I had gone to Batman Begins, because I had a chance, and as usual, I want to go. Seems to be a common refrain. But yeah, I didn't see Oppenheimer in theaters. Dunkirk, really wasn't that interested. Interstellar. Nolan makes movies that are different than any of the other, in my opinion, filmmakers currently working. But that's it. Insomnia, the only movie I saw in theaters that Christopher Nolan directed. It's kind of humiliating, but it's true. Now, as far as Quentin Tarantino, Pulp Fiction is the only movie of his, unless I'm forgetting something. I'm pretty sure I'm not forgetting anything. He's only got 9 movies, right? I would have seen Jackie Brown, but there were a couple of critics, and Roger Ebert liked it, and Siskel, I think. There were a few critics that the way they described it, it just kind of dissuaded me from seeing it. And 97 was a year I saw almost every big movie. I believe I saw all of the Best Picture nominees, even The Sweet Hereafter, the Adam Egoyan film. There's a guy that I had studied in film school, and then he kind of blew up with Sweet Hereafter, which got a shit ton of Oscar nominations. I remember James Cameron, fellow Canadian, was really happy that Egoyan, a guy that he considered a friend, was nominated and his film had gotten such wide acclaim. But the only Tarantino film I saw in theaters what am I talking about? You see, this is when you go without a script. I saw both Kill Bill movies in theaters. They couldn't release 4 hours. This was not Once Upon a Time in America with Sergio Leone in 84. Let's release the 3-hour and 48-minute cut. And in fact, Leone has a 4-hour plus cut, and U.S. distributors, as always, the double middle finger salute, and made him chop it down to 2 hours and 25 minutes. In this instance, Tarantino was going to try to edit the film to where they could at least have a chance. And the notorious Harvey Weinstein, nobody ever said anything. I shouldn't say that. It was understood that Harvey knew what he was doing professionally. We could say he's horrendous, he's Cosby, but worse, whatever it is. But Weinstein did not want Tarantino to cut a frame. He thought it was perfect. He thought it may have been his best work. Don't cut a frame, we'll release it in 2 parts. It turned out to be a good decision. So I did see Kill Bill Part 1 and Kill Bill Part 2 in theaters. And Pulp Fiction, Pulp Fiction. In the mostly pre-internet era, when a lot of information was either on TV, gossip columns that, sometimes just talked about movies, like Liz Smith often talked about movies that were in the pipeline or being shot because she was friends with a lot of people in the business. Cindy Adams, another one. I remember when Pulp Fiction took the top prize, the Palme d'Or, at the 1994 Cannes Film Festival. And it was Clint Eastwood who was the chairperson of that jury. And so, I don't know that Tarantino has made that big of a thing about it, but Clint Eastwood was very involved in that process. And he absolutely was ahead of the curve. He thought Pulp Fiction, he'd never seen anything like it. And I don't know if at that point Clint had seen Reservoir Dogs. That I have no idea. I didn't study that specifically. But when Pulp Fiction, after all of this buzz, unbelievable advanced buzz, winning that, and then critical reviews hitting here in the States long before it opened here. So there was enormous buildup, enormous expectation. I saw the movie with my dad, may he rest in peace. We saw it the night it opened. It wasn't playing everywhere. It was kind of sporadic, limited release. We saw it at the old Comac Multiplex off of LIE Exit 53, another theater that's long since gone the way of the dodo. It closed in 2011. Last movie seen there, The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon and Emily Blunt. Good movie. Doesn't seem like it's going to be science fiction, but it's science fiction. Anyway, we saw Pulp Fiction with a mostly packed house on like a random Friday night in the fall of 1994, and I was blown away. The hype was real. If anything, I thought the movie was even better than I expected. And that's rare when something has that kind of build-up and the expectations still overshoot. Phenomenal. So, Mr. Tarantino, QT, 3 of his movies. Well, really 2, but Kill Bill was cut up into 2 parts and released in 2 different years. But I saw Pulp and Kill Bill 1 and Kill Bill 2. And as I said, Scorsese, just an embarrassing, ridiculous. I wanted to see Gangs of New York. I didn't get around to it. Hell, I didn't even see Giving One Away. Didn't even see Catch Me If You Can. But as far as Mr. Spielberg, I saw Hook. That's the first Spielberg movie I saw in theaters. Again, that was the senior year of high school. So in 1991, the year of Scorsese's Cape Fear, was in theaters at the same time as Hook, if I'm not mistaken. Dad took me to see Hook. It didn't look good, and I didn't like it, and I feel like it's that and The Lost World are the only 2 Spielberg films I've seen that I don't really think are very good. They're not terrible, because the craftsmanship is always above par. And the performances, he usually manages to get the best he can. He's really good with actors. Really good with actors. But I didn't like Hook. And then, I'm thinking that Spielberg is the guy, by far, I've seen the most of his films in theaters. So I saw Hook. I saw Jurassic Park. I read the book first. It's a good adaptation. Not great. And when I say not great, there were certain things that they could have used that they didn't, that I feel like would have made the movie, better. But there's really nothing you can do about that, because in that instance, there were a couple of action sequences that Spielberg wanted to try to film. They just, it sounds stupid. It's Steven Spielberg, but they didn't want to blow the budget up anymore, because it was already with the special effects, the animatronics, the budget was already outlandish. Okay, so I saw that. And I did see Schindler's List. And, there was some talk that Spielberg was going to direct Bridges of Madison County. He ended up producing it, and Clint ended up making the film. I saw Amistad in theaters. Good movie, not great. And I appreciate that Spielberg has been very frank and open about that experience. And he says, to this day, you can Google this one, he reached a point where he did not have to test screen his films. He believes he made a mistake. The way that he would describe it is that there was a better movie to assemble from the footage I had, and I didn't quite find it. It's good, but he feels that it would have actually been enhanced with the test screening process. Saw Saving Private Ryan the day that it opened with my dad, and that was an experience. That that I will never forget. And say whatever you will about Spielberg, the fact that he has been so commercially successful. But what he did there, he put you right in the middle of the battle and gave even someone like me, very cynical guy in his mid-20s, not that far removed from film school, but he made me think about the family members that I had who had passed by that point. They were gone. Who had been there. Neither one died on the battlefield. Neither one died on Omaha Beach or Utah Beach, but both were pretty seriously wounded. And just the thought of 18-year-old boys who had nothing to do with the fight. They had something to do with the fight as far as we were trying to keep Hitler from taking over the world and destroying everything in his path. I get that. But they were just kids. They were just kids. Some of them were still in high school. And they were cannon fodder on that beach. And it's so horrifying. And Spielberg puts you right into the middle of it. It was so raw and real that I almost just ran out of the theater. Like, wait until something that's not this scene comes on. And I've never done that before. And I didn't do it that day, but I almost did. That's how much that movie got to me. Now, I completely forgot. My parents took me to see E.T. in the summer of '82, the same summer as Blade Runner. Now, honestly, and Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. You ask me, I think E.T. is the third best science fiction film of that summer. Star Trek: Wrath of Khan, for me, runs rings around E.T. Sorry. Stephen, I love you. I'm sorry. But Nick Meyer and the team that put together Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, it wasn't Roddenberry, knocked it out of the park. Ricardo Montalban. From hell's heart, I stab at thee. Gone! Gone, you bloodsucker! But yes, I saw E.T. in theaters and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Didn't see any of the Indiana Jones films in theaters. Again, embarrassingly. My old next door neighbor, Matt Stashen, great guy, grew up with him, old friend. He went to see Indy 3 times. I could have gone with him because we actually went to a couple of different movies that summer, or we went to the movies, maybe saw something different. There was a time that he saw Batman, which I hadn't seen, and I think I saw License to Kill, whatever it was. But I saw Lost World Jurassic Park. That actually came out before Amistad. And see, I don't want to take any chances. I keep screwing up. So I'm actually looking. Did not see AI in theaters. I would have seen it if it had been Kubrick. Didn't see AI in theaters. Didn't see War of the Worlds. Didn't see Catch Me If You Can. Minority Report. Man, Spielberg was just knocking out one amazing film after another. The last Spielberg film I saw in theaters, West Side Story, which I liked a lot. I was shocked by how much I liked it. And part of it was I'd never seen the original. I got my fill of musicals in film school. Do you know how many dancing and singing movies I had to watch that were not West Side Story? A lot. A real lot of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And Busby Berkeley musicals. Lola Montez. No, thank you. As my sister would say, no, thank you. Or, as Jack Nicholson would say, so crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here. So it looks like Spielberg is going to be the winner as far as, man, I saw a lot of Spielberg films, right? But I'm sure there are other people who are not as, wacky when it comes to memorizing so many things about movies who saw a lot more Spielberg films. They saw Bridge of Spies. They maybe saw The Adventures of Tintin, certainly War of the Worlds, Munich, a lot of the other movies that he made, because he was banging those films out. Minority Report, huge hit. Catch Me If You Can, as they say, huge hit. So Kubrick, his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, a lot of controversy. And there was I know this is bullshit. There was an interview where Harvey Keitel talked about why he got fired. I believe that crazy story of why Keitel got fired, which was that something happened that wasn't supposed to happen with him and Nicole, that he got too much into character. He made it seem like he complained that Kubrick was doing too many takes. Kubrick always did too many takes. Anyway, Harvey Keitel was supposed to play the role that ended up being Sidney Pollack, and man, Sidney Pollack is good. I love Keitel, but for that role in that movie, Pollack probably should have been the first choice. But I saw Eyes Wide Shut, I believe it was July 30th, 1999, and I saw it at the Huntington, the Shore 8, that was the movie theater closest to me when I was living in Huntington, and I liked it, didn't love it. And in the kind of Kubrick filmography, it's better than Barry Lyndon. Is it better than The Shining? It's impossible to compare those films. It's not better than A Clockwork Orange, which is his masterpiece. Sure as fuck isn't better than 2001: A Space Odyssey or Full Metal Jacket, which I adore. Full Metal Jacket to me is almost as good as A Clockwork Orange. But Eyes Wide Shut is a good film. It could have been shorter, but I see why Kubrick, wanted to do what he did and, make it as long as he did, because it is a longer movie than it would be if it were made today by a different filmmaker. Because basically it's, very old-fashioned take on marriage, where Tom Cruise's character, his wife hasn't cheated on him. They have a stable marriage. But just learning that she, God forbid, had fantasies about another man, he completely loses his shit, goes off the deep end. He's ready to ruin his vows because she confessed that, I saw this guy in uniform and I just was willing to throw everything away to fuck him. And big deal. Well, Bill Harford, the character that Tom plays, it is a big deal, and he completely loses his shit. He goes off the deep end. But that's the only Kubrick film that I saw in theaters. And the last filmmaker on this list, which I say, no Orson Welles, no Alfred Hitchcock, the list is incomplete. Now, I didn't see any of their films, although I saw, again, many of their movies in academic settings that look like movie theaters, but not at the movies. The only Francis Ford Coppola film that I saw in a movie theater is The Rainmaker. Godfather 3, 1990, didn't see it, I just didn't go. The same reason I didn't see Goodfellas. I wasn't going to the movies back then. Rarely went to the movies. Didn't see Home Alone either. Had the opportunity. What are you going to do? But I love The Rainmaker. I know that from the film history perspective and kind of historical importance, I could talk about that all day and half the night. It's not as important a film in Coppola's career, but it is great. It is so entertaining. It's about the law, but it's enough just about people and the characters where you don't have to be interested in legal thrillers or procedurals or anything. It is so entertaining. And Grisham's book is terrific. That my dad read it. I didn't read it. But the adaptation is so solid. And again, all of the actors, Coppola gets everything out of everybody. Mickey Rourke, whose career had hit the skids, he's great. Playing an attorney whose nickname is Bruiser. That is hilarious. And there's a moment where Matt Damon is Jay Limonstone. He starts to call him Bruiser in court. And I remember the audience cracking up because you can't say that. Anyway, Jon Voight, as Jon Voight of the 90s, he did it in Anaconda the same year. Just chewing scenery. He is every line reading. Voight is calling attention to himself. He did it in Enemy of the State too. He is hilarious. But yes, The Rainmaker, great movie. So in summation here, I've seen a lot of Spielberg films in theaters, but other than that, the great filmmakers on that list, I saw 3 by Tarantino, but not really as well represented as they probably should, especially Christopher Nolan, who is a brilliant filmmaker. I love the guy. And with that, walk down memory lane and some current stuff, we've reached the end on this shitty Sunday morning in January of 2024. We have reached the end of episode 49 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all once again for joining me today. If you're checking out the YouTube channel and you enjoyed today's podcast and haven't done so already, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. And I'll be back with episode 50 real soon. Take care.